All right, so let's look at a few news stories. Microsoft just announced last week that they were not going to let you put Windows 11 on incompatible hardware, which frustrates the whole world, as almost everybody's using Windows 10 compatible hardware. They cannot run Windows 11. And now they've reversed themselves, like Microsoft tends to do. Now they will let you do it. You just check a box admitting that maybe it won't run so well. So that's obviously the right thing to do. I think everybody else was just going to do this anyway with registry hacks or other unapproved techniques. Somehow Microsoft seems to have decided to admit reality. Not everybody on the planet is going to buy a new computer for the ineffable joy of running Windows 11 when Windows 10 is better anyway. So, all right. This is something I hope they do. I'm horrified and disgusted at the recycling and trash where I live, and I think it's the same everywhere. People throw plastic and garbage in the compost. The recycling is just a pile of garbage, and that's because there was a law. See, the plastic recycling is a fraud. Yeah. Almost no plastic is ever recycled, but the company that make plastic things sued and said, as a First Amendment right, we should be allowed to stamp a recyclable sticker, a stamp on this thing, even though it's not recyclable. And they appear to have won in court the ability to mark things recyclable that are not recyclable. Yeah.
Well, that's actually very funny because how they get away with it is the sticker they use is actually a slightly altered version of the recyclable sticker.
Oh, that might be it. But anyway, it says 1 through 5. It says, and it turns out, I think another thing is it's technically recyclable. It's just that recycling costs more than making a new one, so nobody actually does it. But technically, it's possible. So it is just ridiculous. And so all the recycling plants, of course, have found that the supposedly sorted trash is just everything all mixed together, which it is everywhere I've been. And so they're thinking of having robots doing it, like the Wall-E robot, in Pixar movie. Anyway, I don't know if it'll do any good, but certainly recycling is a complete fraud everywhere I've been. And I don't know what's going to happen. So this is another piece of malware in the Android App Store. This keeps happening. They say this one has infected 8 million smartphones, which it's possible. I don't know. It's pretty common. This one will steal your cryptocurrency keys and such. This is quite common. They pretend to be bank apps and they get out there. Keeps happening on the Android store. It doesn't happen on the iPhone store hardly ever. In fact, I've never heard anything like this there. So this is a security measure I never heard about until I saw this article, which sounds pretty brilliant. There's a new way to make a secure browser. Every time you open a URL in the browser, it actually opens it in a cloud machine, not on your machine, and runs it there, and then just sends you the pixels so you can see it like you were looking through a telescope, but none of the script is running on your machine. So it can't find your stuff and steal it, which sounds like a pretty secure measure. And Mandiant, the instant response company, found a way to bypass it, but it's a very weak attack. What they found is, what they can do is they can send a QR code back to your machine, a visible QR code. That's what this is going to do. They can open the web page up on the cloud machine, and as it sends back the pixels, they can send pixels for a QR code, and then hope that you'll scan it with your phone. That would be one way to trick you into going somewhere malicious, but of course that's a far cry from the typical malware that runs a script and steals your cookies, pops up boxes and all that jazz. Sounds like a pretty awesome security measure. I've never used any browser with that security measure. I wonder who's using it and whether we could be using that. It seems like a pretty good idea. I imagine it's expensive. You got to pay for a cloud machine and a local machine. But I would think banks and other secure companies might use it. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it having applications there. Beyond that,
yeah, it also might have more features on the cloud machine.
Beyond that, it might not. I don't think it's going to see much use for the general public.
Oh, not unless it's cheap.
It's more time than money. And
yeah.
What I've learned, what I guess we all know, is even if something is better, people won't do it if it costs them money or time.
Right. It has to be cheap and convenient to reach the mass market. Anyway, so this one is pretty interesting, and apparently you can sign up and try it if you like. In fact, they even have a running scoreboard. Microsoft has made a fake large language model email server, and they want people to try to crack it with prompt injection, which is what we talked about, and you've done it in some of the extra hands-on projects here. And It's got a running scoreboard. Yeah, here's the website. So people are doing it. They're going to share a $10,000 prize, whoever wins. And as you see, there's a leaderboard, a bunch of people, the losers, various teams are already going. 17 people have solved this one and so on. There's various challenges. So it looks like a kind of fun CTF kind of thing. Might be worth playing with. But the one, it sounds a little bit annoying. You have to send messages up and you can't see the response directly, but apparently you can somehow deduce whether your injection worked. It's taking email and then running it through some kind of large language model, probably to filter out spam and malware. And your job is to trick the large language model into doing the wrong thing, which, as we've seen, they're almost always vulnerable to. And Microsoft has put a bunch of defenses to try to stop prompt injection, and they're testing to see how well they work. In practice, none of the defenses seem to be much good, but you know, this is a logical way to improve them. Have real attackers attack them, and hopefully you'll improve your defenses to be more effective. So OpenWRT is the free router firmware. A lot of I have used it, a lot of people have used it. You can take the firmware out of your router and replace it with this for many compatible models. And then you get more features that the original, you get all the features that are there in the hardware, which are often more than the default router firmware lets you have. But they made some amazing mistakes here. They have, their development environment has a image builder to build the images, which has a command injection vulnerability. So you can trick it into signing an altered image with the official certificate. But there's a hash verification with SHA-256, which should have been unbreakable, but then they truncated it to only 12 characters, which is terrible, lowering it down to 48 bits, so you can easily make a collision of that. So that's just an amazing mistake. I'm not sure I've heard of anybody doing anything that stupid in a long time. Yeah?
So this is just a side question.
Yeah.
For the grading at the very end, is
Yeah.
it going to be based off of the flag points we have, or based off the quiz points, or is it going to be a mix of both?
They all add together.
They'll add together. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So if I get an A in the quiz points section, but I get a F or a D, then it averages out to like a B?
All that matters is the total number of points. You add them up and then compare them to the total.
Okay, so the points I get from the tests and quizzes and whatnot in Canvas add to flag points.
Exactly.
Okay.
Good. That's an important question. I'm glad you asked.
Okay.
Yep. Anyway, no, everybody should know how the grading works. It's important to get that straight. Anyway, so that made a vulnerability there, and people are worried that they might have, someone could in principle have poisoned the official firmware with malware, although that didn't happen as far as they know. Anyway, that's appalling security practices. And here's another one. So the crooks have written an automatic bot that scours to find just unprotected hard-coded credentials just lying around, which are quite common. In Amazon buckets and other places, they'd sweep them up using a variety of tricks to find them, and then store them in their own unprotected OpenS3 bucket, which a good faith researcher found. So it's sort of funny. They exploit the vulnerability that other people did, and then they recreated the same vulnerability because apparently they're a large team of hackers, and rather than have some kind of credentials, they just made an open bucket to store all this stuff in. So anyway, man, something in the air has hit me. Dust in the air or something. Anyway, so this seems like a useful tool. In China, of course, you have to write everything politically correct. It was a lot worse during the Cultural Revolution, but I think it's still this way. There are political officers watching everything you say. And so they use AI to help make sure everything they say is politically correct. I know people that use this to deal with their college administration. They, instead of writing emails, they will ask an AI, please write this email in a cringing, obsequious way, flattering these administrators, telling them they're wonderful. And AI, that makes them much more successful, you know. If you've ever seen the original King James Bible, it is amazing, and I often think of it as a model for how we should probably communicate with our incoming president. The entire page is, so God blessed the nation of England with the most glorious monarch that was ever created. In his ineffable wisdom, he chose to bestow his benevolence upon us by granting the opportunity for we unworthy scholars, to create this document. And it's a whole page of just effusive praise of the monarch, which is absolutely the right way to address Trump. The last time he was in, people said the only way to get him to read any briefing is to make sure that there's only like 3 or 4 bullet points, and that every bullet point has his name in it. He will only read something with his name in it. He'll only watch television about him. That's all he cares about. And you have to praise him, or he will just get mad at you and ignore everything you say, which is very common for monarchs and despots down through history. Anyway, this guy is amazing, Brian Krebs. A very detailed article in the Wall Street Journal. If you don't know about him, he's a fun guy to read about. He was a journalist at the Washington Post, and he decided to make cybercrime his beat. So he taught himself computer security, and then he taught himself Russian, idiomatic Russian where he can totally pass as a Russian speaker, so he could infiltrate the Russian mafia, which he did, and writes articles on that ground. And he is now found undisclosed location and hiding because an incredible number of mafia figures want to hurt him. They swatted him once or twice, sending police to his door. They mailed cocaine and heroin to his house to get him busted for it and stuff like that. And it's an interesting story about him. He's got I think laid off from Washington Post, and he said, well, I don't need you guys anyway. Just made its own website and put ads on it. He's making more money than he ever did, I think. This is, as you know, the old media is pretty much going away, replaced by the new media, where people just go on YouTube or something. You don't actually need a publishing arm and all that jazz. And he has an amazing series of articles, endless series of articles, mostly about identifying people. One thing he does all the time is if there's some kind of online criminal, he will figure out who they really are, and he will post their real name and photographs and IP address and addresses and history. He's very good at that, which makes you enemies.
So who's the vigilante?
Well, I think technically they call him an investigative reporter, because he doesn't actually like go shoot them or something. He just discovers their secrets and reveals them, which is what investigative reporters do. But he doesn't have any of the protections that he'd have if he was still working at a big corporation like lawyers and stuff.
Or any of the press credentials?
Well, I don't know if there ever were any well-defined proper credentials. I think he certainly got them because he used to work at the Washington Post. But I think the only credential you might ask for is maybe a degree in journalism, although they don't really require that. The other thing is that big organizations, they have fact checkers that check things, and I think he has fact checkers. But yeah, I mean, this is, I think there are no actual rules for this. Anybody is allowed to be a journalist. You can just go and do it. I did it for a while. I worked for an underground newspaper. Just go out there. The thing is, I discovered I wasn't tough enough. I went to photograph protests, and they were protesting the Iraq War at the Concord Naval Weapons Station, and there were like 100 Army guys with guns standing on one side of a fence, and the protesters were right on the other side of the fence, and they started tearing up the tracks so they couldn't run the trains to deliver the weapons. And I thought, they're probably going to charge them. And I was taking pictures, and I said, I don't know how close I should get. And I looked for where the other photographers were, and the lesbian photographers for a lesbian newspaper were right there, 1 inch from the guns, taking pictures. And I said, I need another job. I don't have the guts to do this job. That's where you have to be to get the awesome pictures. I was further back. I'm like, damn, you have to be crazy to do this. Charge right into the jaws of certain death to get a great picture, like wartime journalists. I was not cut out for that job. But that's what they do, and I don't think they need any particular credentials to do it other than just nerves of steel. Anyway, those are the news articles I wanted to show you.